A la segunda feria virtual. Sean todos bienvenidos a la segunda feria virtual del libro Oserco, Evolución Educativa de la Enseñanza de Idiomas. Ayer tuvimos una jornada muy interesante dedicada a los libros para niños de preescolar y primaria. Hoy es el turno de los jóvenes de bachillerato. Mi nombre es Ludmila Kariakin y los estaré acompañando durante hoy y mañana en la segunda feria virtual del libro Oserco, Evolución Educativa en la Enseñanza del Idioma. Durante esta feria virtual contaremos con la participación de representantes de prestigiosas editoriales reconocidas a nivel mundial como Pearson, National Geographic, Merriam-Webster y Sadler, los cuales nos presentarán los textos educativos más novedosos del mercado nacional e internacional. Cada día presentarán su material didáctico para cada etapa educativa. Niños de preescolar, primaria, como les comenté, jóvenes de bachillerato y adultos. Ante todo, queremos mencionarles la trayectoria de Distribuidora Oserco, y es que llevan más de 25 años apoyando la educación en Venezuela a través de la distribución del libro en físico y contenido digital para el aprendizaje de idiomas. Además, ofrecen asesorías de calidad para colegios y profesores con la finalidad de satisfacer las necesidades tanto de los alumnos como del personal docente. También cuentan con material para la formación técnica y universitaria de la mano de reconocidas editoriales como Pearson, Sadler, Scholastic, Cengage, Nat Geo y Merriam-Webster. Su pilar fundamental desde 1996 es la educación, siendo la mejor herramienta para el desarrollo de cada individuo. Se encuentran ubicados en la ciudad de Caracas, Venezuela, con el propósito de brindar un servicio completo con miras a mejorar la calidad educativa en nuestro país. No obstante, queremos invitarlos a participar en nuestro concurso siguiéndonos en nuestras redes sociales @osercobooks. Solo debes acompañarnos vía Zoom durante estos 3 días y seguirnos en las cuentas de Instagram. Sin más que agregar, queremos darle la bienvenida a nuestra primera invitada. Ella es la representante de la editorial Sadler, Nicole Stephen. Welcome, Nicole. Let me give a little bit of info about you. Nicole Stephen is a national academic consultant with Sadler School. She is a licensed teacher certified in grades 1 to 6 and special education from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Nicole has worked with Sadler for over 6 years. First, as a sales representative in the New England area, and more recently as a national consultant, supporting teachers as they learn about Sadler's academic program. So, Nicole, the mic is all yours.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm really happy to be here with you today and introduce you to 2 of Sadler's programs for teaching and learning. So I'm really excited to introduce you first to Vocabulary Workshop and then to Progress English Language Arts, both appropriate for grades 6 through 12. Next slide, please. Vocabulary Workshop is a vocabulary and context program which allows you to provide direct and explicit instruction on both vocabulary words and word learning strategies for your students. Students would have access to a student edition workbook. Teachers would have an annotated teacher edition for support, including front matter support and guidance for implementation. And there are a variety of online resources available to support classroom instruction, as well as for students to enhance their learning. Next slide. Vocabulary Workshop Achieve follows a 2-week or a 10 classroom day pacing period. It includes suggestions to integrate both classwork and homework for exceptional exposure to the practice exercises. Next slide, please. The lesson layout is consistent across the grade levels, and the words are presented in a variety of informational text genres. Here's an example of a particular unit from one of the grade levels. The vocabulary words are delivered in context of the passage, and they are bolded throughout the passage so that you can guide students with instruction on using context clues to determine the meaning of unfamiliar words. Next slide. After introducing the words in context, students will have access to a definitions list. These are student-friendly definitions that include dictionary pronunciations, part of speech, a sentence to clarify meaning, and an opportunity for partners to work together. The way that Vocabulary Workshop Achieve is organized is in a 10-10 model. What this means is we have broken down a 20-word list into two sets, sets A and B, for a more manageable word list for both students and teachers. Next slide. You always begin with set A practice. So students have an opportunity to work with and become familiar with the first set A of 10 words. They'll do a multiple option of student practice exercises, including an exercise in using context, choosing the right word, and completing the sentence. Next slide. Students will repeat the practice exercises, this time with the second set of 10 words. Next slide. We bring all 20 words back together for set A and B practice, focused on both synonyms and antonyms. This is important practice for students and can often be done using a graphic organizer or as a collaborative classroom activity. At the very end of the set A and set B practice, we have a writing opportunity. We want students to be able to use the vocabulary words that they've been introduced to or details from the passage in their own context in writing. Next slide. Following the set A and set B practice, we then introduce students to a new passage labeled Vocabulary in Context, another opportunity for students to see the vocabulary words bolded throughout the passage and answer the text-dependent or vocabulary-dependent questions. Next slide. After every third chapter, we do have our review units. It's important for students to have an opportunity to review vocabulary words so that we can ensure retention. The way that vocabulary for comprehension is organized is it's either a one type of passage or a paired passage. Students again read the passage and answer the text-dependent questions as part of the review. Next slide. Continuing as part of the review will be an opportunity for word study. So it's within the word study that students will enter into exercises with synonyms, potentially 2-word completions. Next slide. Word study continues with examination on denotation, connotation, classical roots. So Greek and Latin roots are a focus of the word study. Next slide. And online, a full selection of resources, including the audio for the passage and the vocabulary words, so both pronunciation and use in a sentence to clarify meaning. We have the images that would be available for students and teachers to make connections and deepen their understanding of the vocabulary words, graphic organizers to help students connect meanings, digital flashcards, additional support activities, and of course, online assessments are available, and this comes as an interactive edition. So a great way to teach vocabulary in context for grades 6 through 12. Next slide, please. I'm really excited to introduce this other program to you regarding Progress English Language Arts. This has a copyright of 2022. We are excited to introduce this as a resource for back to school 2022-2023 school year. Next slide. Progress ELA is a student work text that is full of content-dependent passages for grade levels and to engage students and teachers with reading strategies. So the Progress ELA book focuses on both the reading strategies and the writing genres. The way the book is organized is the first 6 chapters are focused on the reading strategies. And we focus that 50-50 balance of informational text and literary text. So you can see that, for example, chapter 1 would be focused on a literary text. Chapter 2 would be focused on informational text. And we dive into all of the reading strategies. On the next set of table of contents, this unfolds across the writing genres. We do offer related reading and writing units. So if teachers like to teach thematically, that is a possibility with a resource like this, but this covers all of the reading genres and the writing genres as well. Next slide. As you can see, the reading units are organized by reading standards. So key ideas and details, followed by craft and structure, and integration of knowledge and ideas. Noticing that 50-50 balance of literary text and informational text. We make a notation of which reading chapters connect with the writing chapters. Let's look a little bit closer at chapter 4 for craft and structure on informational text. We always begin with our unit introduction. This is going to introduce both the theme and the standards that are going to be covered as part of the chapter. We do provide a self-diagnostic assessment. This is for students. So we want students to know and understand what they are going to be working on as part of the chapter. Next page. In the very beginning of each chapter, we do offer our home connection. This is really to strengthen that home-school connection. It helps to inform parents and families about what their child is going to be learning at school, and so that they can extend the learning into the home. There are also directions for some online activities to supplement their in-class learning. Next slide. Our unit openers are beautifully designed and are meant to get students engaged in the essential question. So the essential question always appears at the very front of the chapter. We talk about the text type. So in this particular chapter, we're focused on the informational text, and we're going to be focusing in on craft and structure. There are 3 texts that are introduced as part of evaluating and learning about craft and structure. There is a mini table of contents on this page as well. So this particular chapter is full of rich text that will allow students to examine their knowledge of craft and structure. Next page. We're going to start by introducing students to analyzing word meanings underneath the key anchor standard of craft and structure. This is called guided instruction, and we follow the guided release model. So that follows the steps of I do, we do, you do. So this part of guided instruction is teacher-led, and the teacher is going to introduce students to vocabulary and model for them how to use and cite evidence from the text to determine word meanings. So you can see that this is a passage on unusual weather patterns, so it's a highly relevant passage. They are related to the content areas that you are going to cover as part of this grade level. Next page. You'll continue with your guided instruction, and there is always going to be an opportunity for a comprehension check, making sure that students are understanding the text which they are reading. Next slide. You'll move on to guided practice, which is still focused on that same passage. We're still looking at analyzing word meanings, but during guided practice, this is an opportunity for students to work with a partner. So we are having students work with a partner to determine the meaning of unfamiliar words and analyze word meanings as part of a text to determine the craft of the author's purpose. Next slide. Finally, at the end of the guided release model, we're on to the independent practice. So here's where we want students to apply what we have taught them. This is an opportunity for students to work through this particular passage on their own, cite evidence, and perform on the comprehension check, as well as an open response item at the very end. Next slide. There are going to be 3 related passages built into the chapter. So we're going to, again, repeat the guided release model. So here we are again on guided instruction. This time we're focusing in on text structure. So we're going to, once again, guide students through the words to know with the vocabulary, make sure that they understand how to compare structure within the text and do a quick comprehension check. Next slide. We'll continue to work on analyzing text structure in the context of this passage. Next slide. And then we'll move on to guided practice. So again, an opportunity for students to work together and complete that comprehension check. Next slide. We arrive at independent practice. We want to see if students are able to analyze text structure using the strategies that we've introduced them to. So students will attempt to read the passage independently and answer the questions related to it. Our final passage is focused on analyzing points of view. So we're still focused on the anchor standard craft and structure, but again, we're going to begin with that guided instruction. So this is the teacher modeling based on the passage Watching the Weather. Next passage. Students will continue under the analyzing points of view and completing the comprehension check, followed by, again, an opportunity to work in pairs. You'll notice the connection to the weather, and finally arriving at independent practice, where they're using what they have been taught in terms of reading strategies to analyze the author's point of view. Next slide. As part of each chapter, students will be able to connect across the text. So we want them to be able to synthesize information and reference the 3 texts to list details about the author's point of view. So they're going to be making those connections. We also ask them to circle back to connect to the essential question and to connect thematically to all of the content passages. The language standards are covered in the reading units. The vocabulary acquisition and use standards are also introduced here. You can see we do follow that guided release model here as well, using the guided instruction, guided practice, and independent practice model. Next slide. Each unit review is going to review the content of the chapter. What you'll recognize here is that the types of text and the questions that you'll encounter do mirror state assessments or standardized assessments that you may be familiar with. Next slide. And then we move into the writing units. So the writing units introduce a theme and a type of writing, as well as the same type of self-diagnostic assessment. We want children to be able to self-monitor what they currently know about the topic that we're going to introduce and what they're going on to learn after you've introduced the strategies. Next slide. Again, another home connection will help you make that strong connection with parents and families at home, letting them know what you're going to introduce students to as part of this chapter. Next slide. And our unit opener again features a connected research paper chapter in this case. So we're connecting the writing unit and it's related to the reading unit. The essential question, again, is going to be thematically introduced. This one's focused on the earth and sky, and you've got that mini table of contents to guide you through the instruction. Next slide. We're introduced to a student model to begin with. This is a great example of student work, and this is the expectation that students would be able to produce a student piece of authentic work at the end of this writing a research paper lesson. Next slide. Students will continue to analyze the different standards of the research paper. Next slide. Students will be able to use this graphic organizer to outline their writing research paper reports. And students will continue on with the language standards. So we do cover the language standards as well as the speaking and listening standards throughout the writing units. Students will have an opportunity to discuss the essential question. Again, this is a great opportunity for collaboration. So students can make notes about ideas that they agree with, disagree with, questions that they've asked, questions that they have as part of the discussion. And this is a great opportunity to lead that classroom discussion and focus on that essential question and thematics. Each chapter is going to feature that review. So students are asked to read the student model, make corrections as needed, and answer the questions. And there's a glossary in the back to support both students and teachers. We do have a full selection of resources within the teacher's guide. So I'll have you move to the next slide, please. Inside the teacher's edition, support for implementation includes a unit planner. Unit progressions charts are available. So the unit progression charts are a fabulous way for you to determine what standards students should have addressed in the previous grade levels and what they're going to go on to learn in the next upcoming grade levels. So the objectives are listed for you. It's again, a great way for differentiation. We feature comprehensive lesson plans. There's scaffolded skill applications. So we want to make sure that we are having students access the content in the way that they are most comfortable and able to. There's support for differentiation. A pacing guide is available, and you'll see some embedded professional development as well. Next slide. Next slide. So here is an example of the learning progressions. We want to make sure that teachers fully understand what is expected of students. So this talks about analyzing word meanings, analyzing text structure, analyzing points of view, and what is expected of students in the current year, the previous year, and the upcoming year for each standard that is covered as part of the chapter. Next page. You'll see that you'll have plenty of support to introduce and lead a conversation about the essential question with your students. You'll be directed to introduce the general academic vocabulary as well as the domain-specific vocabulary. And if there is a cross-curricular connection, we'll make sure that you're aware of what that is so you can work with students on that domain-specific vocabulary. Next slide. The objective is always available for you up in the top left-hand corner, and we talk about the genre, helping you set the purpose and providing you the resources to model and teach directly from this resource. Next slide. You'll see that plenty of opportunity to cite evidence as you're giving students some specific guidance on working through analyzing word meanings. And during the comprehension check, we give you suggested answers as well as conversation starters. Next slide. You'll want to recap the reading selection as you begin the next day. And here's your opportunity to have students do some guided practice together. Suggestions for partner work is on the right-hand side. This one suggests a write around. Next slide. And as you arrive at the independent practice, this is the place where students are going to read and apply. We want to see if they are able to demonstrate understanding of the skill that you just introduced. So you'll check for critical comprehension at the end, and depending on how students answer, we do have some corrective feedback models that you can provide. Next slide. Support for differentiating instruction is available as part of the Teacher's Edition. You'll see them, they are color-coded, so support for English language learners, discussion skills, differentiating instruction, and digital connections. Those are all supports that you can implement across the different grade levels. Support for accelerating instruction is there as well. Next slide. As you move into the next passage, again, the entire cycle repeats itself. So we're going to follow once again that guided release model. So introducing that objective, making sure that this time students understand that they are working with a different type of text. So this time we have a technical text. We're going to set the purpose for reading, provide that modeling for students, and complete the comprehension check. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Students will have an opportunity to work with partners. Once again, during guided instruction, students will be directed to look specifically for connections between paragraphs, discuss with partners about the related paragraphs, and answer the comprehension check. Next slide. Next slide, please. Here's an opportunity for partners to work together. You'll see multiple opportunities, whether it's write around, turn and talk. So that happens during the guided practice opportunity. And then moving on to independent practice. Again, you're going to make sure that students can apply what they've learned. You'll recap that section and then move on. Next slide. 3 related passages are all available to help as you are introducing this particular reading strategy on craft and structure. Next slides. Next slide. And we also have the same type of teacher support for the writing units. Continue, next slide. So if you're introducing students to the Connect Across text work, this is the graphic organizer. There are rubrics that you can follow. So depending on how students answer the question, you will score that appropriately, and then there is an opportunity for discussion. At the end of the chapter, you'll want to do a theme wrap-up. There is some guidance to lead that discussion as well. You can see up at the top of the right-hand page, it says Support Essential Question Discussion, and that is your wrap-up to end your unit. Next slide. In terms of the writing units, you'll want to make sure that you'll do the chapter review. So you'll introduce students to the chapter summary, introduce the review, make sure that students understand that they are applying multiple concepts that they've been introduced to. So it may be analyzing word meanings, craft and structure. So there are a variety of skills that they need to apply here as part of the chapter review. Next slide. Our digital resources for support online are incredibly robust. So this is a comprehensive English language arts program that provides instruction in all of the reading strategies as well as all of the writing genres. And as far as digital resources online, we have student ebooks, teacher ebooks, There's opportunity for additional practice for each introduced strategy. The comprehension checks are all available online. We have our instructional videos. Close reading practice and fluency practice are two opportunities for additional instruction that are available as part of the online resources. And we have a custom assessment feature. So if teachers need to do some strategic reteaching, create extra practice, extra credit, all of that can be done using the custom assessment system. All right, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate your attention to the Vocabulary Workshop Achieve and Progress English Language Arts program. Copyright is 2022.
Thank you, Nicole. Do you mind staying with us a couple seconds to see if we have some questions for you?
Sure.
So the floor is open for you to ask questions to Nicole. I have a couple questions. I was amazed by the material you were presenting. And I was wondering, you mentioned something about the learning progression kind of material that you give to, could teachers use that to support assessments or to use them to assess the students? What do you
Sure.
think?
So absolutely. So if you identified the objective or the skill that was part of the learning objective, part of the learning progression for that particular grade level, and then determined an assessment that was related to that objective, you absolutely could. We also have online a way for you to assess specific learning objectives. So we can help you with prerequisite grade level skills. So all of the skills that students should have acquired in the previous grade level, we can assess those. We can also assess students' grade level skills as well, so separately. So prerequisite skills as well as on grade level skills can be assessed as part of that program.
Wonderful, wonderful. I noticed that you have a lot of readings. I was wondering, what kind of topics do you have from those readings?
So they are on grade level topics. They vary. There's the focus on the water cycle. There's a couple that I'm familiar with. A lot of them are focused on weather for informational text. We focus on different genres for the literary text as well. So there might be fables. There could be narratives. So there are a variety of texts. And the great thing is that each chapter includes 3 separate texts. So it gives students an opportunity to engage 3 times with related text. And I know teachers are always looking for resources to help build their classroom library of on-grade level texts that are great for instruction, and these really meet that need.
Amazing. And the videos are also related to the ones that you mentioned online, are also related to each of the chapters?
That is correct. So if we are providing instruction on, for example, asking and answering questions or key ideas and details, we have an instructional video to help readers understand what they look for and how to identify key ideas and details and how to ask and answer questions as you're reading. So we provide video instruction on that.
Super. Thank you very much for answering my questions. So if we have some more questions, we can ask them. Do we have more questions? Let me check. Okay, I think we do not have any other questions. Thank you very much, Nicole. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Agradecemos a Nicole. Muy interesante toda la información que compartió con nosotros. Quiero comentarles a todos los que nos ven que Oserco ha asistido a las principales ferias del país en Mérida, Carabobo y Caracas, con el fin de acercarse cada vez más a los clientes para orientar y ofrecer los mejores productos acordes a sus necesidades. El año pasado realizó la primera feria virtual del libro, Trascendiendo el Papel, con invitados de lujo, y este año estamos muy agradecidos con todos ustedes por hacer posible esta segunda edición. Les recordamos que tenemos un concurso para ustedes, y es que siguiéndonos en nuestra red social de Instagram, @OsercoBooks, podrás participar por un fabuloso premio. Nuestra siguiente invitada, representa a National Geographic and Cengage, y queremos darle la bienvenida a Patricia Mendoza, Learning Consultant at National Geographic Learning for the Columbia Coast, 6 years working at Nat Geo Learning, with 28 years of experience in different editorials. Thank you, Nancy, for being here with us. So the floor is yours.
Muy buenas tardes.
Sorry, Patricia.
Muy buenas tardes. Bueno, yo les voy a presentar las opciones que tenemos para adolescentes. Nuestras propuestas de adolescentes tienen un objetivo transversal en todas sus series, que es que los estudiantes se identifiquen su lugar en el mundo a través de contenidos reales de todo el mundo, fotografías reales, lugares reales, y con esto vamos a lograr que los estudiantes puedan aprender el idioma inglés y las habilidades del siglo XXI. Introduce además en cada uno de sus contenidos la colaboración y el pensamiento crítico. Vamos a... una de nuestras propuestas más interesantes es New Closet. New Closet es una serie que consta de 5 niveles y está desarrollada para trabajar más de 5 horas semanales. Su objetivo principal, además de desarrollar las 4 habilidades del idioma inglés, es preparar a los estudiantes para las pruebas internacionales. El libro o la serie consta, de 5 niveles, las cuales abarcan según el marco común europeo desde el A2, el nivel A2 hasta el nivel B2 más, es decir, desde elementary hasta upper intermedio. Vamos a conocer un poquito cómo está estructurada nuestra serie y empezamos con comentarles de que nuestro libro prepara a los estudiantes para que sean estudiantes o personas de éxito, tanto en el salón de clase como las pruebas internacionales, y también los prepara para la vida, para que sean personas de éxito para la vida, para futuras carreras profesionales. Nuestro material, como les dije, trabaja todo lo que es la parte de visual a través de fotografías impactantes de todo el mundo, logrando que el estudiante salga de su contexto y mire qué lugar puede ocupar él en otras partes del mundo. Trabaja las 4 habilidades, desarrolla las 4 habilidades para la enseñanza del inglés, como son lectura, escritura, escuchar y hablar. Entonces, a través de estas habilidades, el estudiante puede hacer un proceso y ser exitoso en su vida. También, como les dije, que no solamente trabajaba las 4 habilidades, sino que su objetivo principal era preparar a los estudiantes para las pruebas internacionales, y tenemos como base las pruebas Cambridge que se desarrollaron en el 2020, y a través de estas pruebas pues hacemos actividades para que los estudiantes practiquen el tipo de preguntas que se trabajan en estas pruebas. Bueno, también tenemos que los estudiantes pueden prepararse para futuras carreras, y a través de diferentes actividades como mapas conceptuales, videos, fotografías, los vamos preparando para que ellos sean exitosos en carreras futuras. ¿Cómo desarrollamos todas estas características o estas opciones que le di en cada una de las series? A través de las unidades. ¿Cómo va a estar desarrollada cada una de las unidades en New Closet? Vamos a trabajar varias sesiones como son reading, vocabulario, listening. Vamos a tener 2 sesiones de gramática y una de speaking. Y también trabajamos lo que es la parte de producción. Esta es la apertura de unidad de uno de nuestros libros, donde siempre vamos a iniciar con una fotografía de un lugar, persona o contenidos reales, y va a hacerse con una gran pregunta que van a acercar al estudiante a la temática que se va a trabajar. Aquí tenemos una de las secciones que es Reading. Siempre vamos a tener diferentes lecturas de diferentes géneros y enseguida vamos a pasar a lo que es la comprensión de esa misma lectura. Mire que son lecturas variadas. Aquí estamos hablando de una cultura que es la japonesa. Cada una de las sesiones va a trabajar la parte de exámenes, cómo va a ser preguntas, cómo son las preguntas para los exámenes internacionales, y le van a dar tips para el desarrollo de esos exámenes. Aquí tenemos la parte de vocabulario donde se trabaja el vocabulario focus, y también tenemos mucho trabajo de audio en cada una de las secciones. Aquí tenemos un ejemplo de la sección de gramática de New Close-Up. Aquí trabajamos la parte de listening, donde tenemos las actividades que desarrollamos con el acompañamiento también de como base de las pruebas internacionales. La segunda sección de gramática y cómo manejar el inglés, cómo hacer uso del inglés, y sin dejar de lado pues la parte de producción de textos. ¿De qué consta? Perdón. ¿Cuáles son los materiales que vamos a trabajar en Close-Up? En Close-Up la tenemos en diferentes versiones. Lo tenemos el Close-Up impreso, el libro impreso. Lo tenemos en la parte de un pack, que es el libro impreso más la plataforma. Y tenemos también el online practice. La plataforma contiene todo el libro digital, también contiene el ebook y contiene todo lo que es videos, fotografías, asignación de actividades. Esto es la parte de Close-Up. Volvamos otra vez aquí y le digo cuáles son los componentes de la serie. Para el docente tenemos el libro del profesor, tenemos el Graphic Presentation Tool, que es un link digital donde los profesores pueden desarrollar la clase de manera virtual. Trae videos, trae actividades complementarias, trae worksheet, trae los audios. Tenemos otro recurso que es los exam views, que nos ayudan mucho con la parte de los exámenes, y es una plataforma donde los profesores pueden realizar sus exámenes con solo clicar. Es un banco de preguntas. Tenemos una cantidad de bancos de preguntas que por cada una de las unidades. Está el Learning Management System, que es un recurso muy importante para el desarrollo profesional de los profesores, donde acompañamos a los profesores a desarrollar charlas y conocimientos sobre la serie. Bueno, para los estudiantes tenemos los siguientes componentes, que son el libro, ya sea digital o virtual, y tenemos también lo que es el online practice, que es la plataforma donde pueden desarrollar lo que es la parte digital de las actividades. También viene, este año nos migramos a una nueva plataforma que se llama Baline, que es considerada ganó el concurso como la mejor plataforma académica a nivel mundial, y es con la que estamos trabajando la mayoría de nuestras series nuevas. Entonces, como les decía, para los estudiantes viene el libro físico como tal, la plataforma y el ebook que viene dentro de la plataforma. Este sería una de nuestras series principales. Como les dije, tiene como objetivo la preparación para las pruebas internacionales. La segunda propuesta que le presentamos es Tyson. Tyson es una de nuestras propuestas líderes en el mercado. Está desarrollada para trabajar de 1 a 4 horas semanales. Lo que pretendemos con Tyson es el desarrollo de las 4 habilidades, que los estudiantes tengan su propia voz y llevar el mundo al salón de clases. Tyson viene en versión americana y está, según el marco común europeo, abarca desde el nivel pre-A1 hasta un B1, es decir, desde un pre-beginner hasta el pre-intermedio. Entonces, vamos a ver un poquito de Tyson, cómo está desarrollada cada una de las unidades. Empezamos y tiene como objetivo el desarrollo de que el estudiante explore el mundo, el desarrollo de las actividades y que el estudiante se interese en su salón de clase. Es un libro una serie muy llamativa, muy enriquecedora y adicional a eso, llama la atención de los estudiantes, le permiten que los estudiantes puedan expresarse, quieran dar su opinión a través de todo el contenido que le presentamos. Esta es como el recorrido que le damos a cada una de las unidades. Siempre en todas nuestras series vamos a empezar con una fotografía llamativa que los estudiantes quieran opinar sobre la fotografía, y con una gran pregunta. Los temas son al contexto del estudiante para que se sienta distraído, motivado a participar. Entonces, siempre vamos a iniciar con un lenguaje sencillo, claro, para que los estudiantes tengan mucho mejor comprensión del mismo. Y le presentamos el vocabulario focus que se va a trabajar en el tema. Cada vez que iniciamos una actividad, la iniciamos con fotografías o lugares reales. Esta es una parte de lectura que puede ser una lectura muy visual para llamar la atención de los estudiantes. Siempre vamos a ir incrementando en forma de espiral el vocabulario. Entonces, ¿cómo logramos que el estudiante explore su mundo? A través, como les dije, de fotografías relevantes que conecten con el contexto del estudiante. También manejamos mucho la parte de los videos. En cada una de las unidades presentamos un video que va muy conectado en la temática que estamos dando, y lo trabajamos antes, durante y después de la lectura del video. Se trabajan diferentes actividades con base al video. Y trabajamos en cómo es la práctica a través de diferentes lugares del mundo. Entonces, aquí estamos ya en la parte del desarrollo de la temática en clase. Trabajamos con video, fotografías. En la parte de la plataforma le presentamos, la pueden trabajar desde el celular, desde un link que le presentamos. Los estudiantes pueden trabajar en el salón de clases desde su celular o desde cualquier lugar donde se encuentre. ¿Qué tenemos para los docentes de la parte digital? Tenemos el Clase Presentation Tool, que al igual que en todas nuestras series es una herramienta para el desarrollo de clases, donde contiene los libros en forma digital, contiene videos, contiene actividades y contiene para el docente una serie de herramientas adicionales para trabajar en clases. El Online Practice Book, que contiene, como les dije anteriormente, el ebook, contiene el ebook y le permite a los docentes asignar actividades y poder trabajar cada una de las actividades del libro de manera digital. Y también, como le comenté en la serie anterior, presenta una plataforma para desarrollo profesional de los profesores en cualquier temática que pues sea de interés de ellos. ¿Cuáles son los materiales con que cuenta el estudiante? Cuenta con el Student Book, cuenta con un workbook físico, la edición también viene en combo split y edición full. Tiene el Online Practice que contiene el ebook, como les dije, y también tiene los recursos en línea para el estudiante en la página. Para el docente contamos con el Teacher Book, contamos con el Clase Presentation Tool, contamos con la herramienta de Exam View y contamos con la herramienta de desarrollo profesional y los recursos que encontramos en la página de cada uno de los libros para los docentes. Esta es la presentación de un libro, de una unidad de el libro de Line, así lo presentamos, de Tyson, así lo presentamos, que ya les di el recorrido anteriormente anteriormente. Bueno, y haciendo un resumen de Tyson, bueno, como les dije, vienen 5 niveles, viene desde el nivel Starter hasta el nivel 4 y abarca desde un Pre-A1 a un B1. Aquí están pues los links donde pueden encontrar mucha más información al respecto de Tyson. Otra serie que les quería presentar es, bueno, esta no, es Perpeti. Perpeti es una serie que también está desarrollada para más de 5 horas semanales. Viene en versión británica y versión americana y tiene como objetivo que el estudiante se identifique con su propia voz. Porque está acompañado siempre, cada una de sus unidades está acompañado por los TED Talk. Tenemos un convenio con los TED Talk, que son videos motivadores y que lo que buscamos es que los estudiantes se identifiquen con estos videos porque son personas que son inspiradoras para los adolescentes. Esta serie abarca desde un nivel A2 hasta un C1, o sea, desde beginner hasta advanced. Vamos a hacer un recorrido por el libro para que lo conozcamos un poquito más. Perpeti, es una de introduce siempre va a iniciar con, como les dije, con cada una de las unidades con una imagen y una pregunta de apertura para que los estudiantes se identifiquen con el tema que van a trabajar. Permite que los estudiantes puedan dar su propia opinión, trabaja mucho lo que es el pensamiento crítico y a través de los TED Talk, que son los que les mencionaba, los estudiantes pueden identificarse y crear su propia opinión al respecto. Por aquí. Cada una de las unidades va a trabajar las siguientes secciones, que son vocabulario, listening, gramática, reading. Tiene 2 secciones de gramática y, como les dije, cada una de las unidades al final va a manejar lo que son los TED Talks que apoyan la temática vista. Siguiente, voy a seguir por aquí. Esta es la presentación de la unidad. Pues aquí está una apertura unidad. Aquí tenemos precisamente un paisaje colombiano. Y cada una de las unidades inicia con una gran pregunta y de una vez pasamos a lo que es a trabajar el vocabulario a través de una serie de actividades de diferente índole. Aquí tenemos la sesión de listening. De esta forma la trabajamos. El estudiante se le presentan también diferentes opciones para que él se identifiquen con, de opciones de preguntas para que él se identifiquen con la que más vaya según su criterio. Es otra de las sesiones donde trabajamos la parte del vocabulario. Con cada una de las actividades que mostramos, presentamos el vocabulario foco de la unidad. Y aquí tenemos la parte de gramática. Y por último, tenemos lo que son los TED Talks al final de cada una de las unidades, apoyando a la temática vista en la unidad. Para finalizar, como resumen, Perspectives tiene 4 niveles y para los estudiantes tiene el Student Book con el Practice Online. Aquí trabajamos con otra plataforma que se llama MyLT. Tiene el Workbook impreso y también viene en combo split. Para los profesores tiene el Teacher Edition con todas las instrucciones de cada una de las unidades, cómo se van a desarrollar, el Class Presentation Tool y el CD de SMView, que bueno, ya no es CD, ahora es un link. Entonces, ese sería todas las propuestas que tenemos para los adolescentes.
Muchísimas gracias, Patricia. De verdad, excelente tu presentación. Quería ver si hacíamos unas preguntas, si tenemos unas preguntas en el chat para Patricia. Te leo por aquí, me dicen, buenas tardes, el libro de Close Up solo viene en inglés británico, el de New Close Up.
El de New Close Up solamente viene en inglés británico.
Usted mencionó, profesora, que creo que en el de Close Up también, que podían los alumnos prepararse para las pruebas internacionales.
Sí, Close Up. Sí, perdón, continúa.
No, quería preguntarle si esas eran las pruebas de TOEFL, de IELTS.
No, las pruebas que manejamos o sea, el desarrollo que manejamos son pruebas generales Cambridge. No está enfocado en una sola prueba, sino en todas las pruebas generales de Cambridge.
Perfecto. Y una pregunta final. El libro, la serie de Perspective, ¿está enfocado en algún grupo de alumnos específicos, solo para cuarto y quinto año? ¿O sirve para todo el bachillerato completo?
No, viene para todo en la secundaria, para toda la secundaria. Okay. Y se establece según el desarrollo de cada institución el nivel.
Okay. Buenísimo, muy amable, profesora. Si hay alguna otra pregunta, podemos entonces darle las gracias nuevamente a la profesora Patricia, muy amable por habernos presentado los libros de hoy. Se lo agradezco muchísimo.
No, a ustedes por darnos la oportunidad de presentar.
Muy amable, gracias. Seguimos entonces. Si tienen alguna pregunta sobre esta o cualquiera de las presentaciones, pueden también nuevamente dejar su inquietud al final, dejarlas en el chat y al final también las revisaremos. Y haremos todo lo posible por responder sus inquietudes. Les cuento que Oserco Actualmente tiene libros para el aprendizaje de idiomas con precios de regalo. Pueden ver su catálogo en su página web www.osercobooks.com. También puedes comunicarte con ellos al 0424-324-7833 o por correo electrónico osercocaracas@gmail.com. Estas direcciones de correo electrónicos y teléfonos estarán visibles en el chat para que puedan tomar nota. Recuerden que tenemos un concurso para ustedes. Solo debes participar en nuestra feria vía Zoom durante estos días y seguirnos en Instagram, @osercobooks en Instagram. Nuestra siguiente invitada es de la plenaria de Pearson, Nancy Reeves. Nancy Reeves holds a Bachelor of Arts in Literature and Philosophy, a Master of Arts in Spanish from Penn State University, and a Master of Arts in English from the University of Louisiana at Monroe, as well as postdoctoral studies in research from the University of Leicester and in curriculum from Pan American University. She has taught in different academic settings from elementary to university level in different countries. She has also given lectures in several countries. She has worked in curriculum design in several institutions. She joined the Pearson family as product specialist from Central America in 2017 and works as academic coach for Mexico and Central America. So let's welcome Professor Nancy. Thank you for being here, really.
Oh, thank you. It's been very enlightening, everything that people have shared. So I hope that I'm as entertaining and I provide you with all the information that you might need regarding Pearson and our resources that we would like to share with you. So I don't know if we can share the presentation. Perfect. So before we start, just wanted to let you know that all of the information provided by Pearson, it's abided by the confidential rights of Pearson Educación Mexico. So we can go ahead and start. So we're going to talk to you about some of the resources that we have for our adolescents. And we're going to emphasize on a new resource, a new book that we have, but also one component that we as teachers have been very concerned about, which is assessment. So we're going to split this session within the resource, and we're also going to talk about assessment resources that we have available. So one of the things that we have brand new is hashtag. Yes, you can continue to the next slide. Hashtag is an English product based on English American, of course, and it's going to give you several levels where you're going to combine the global scale of English, which is one of the scales that we use in Pearson, that it gives you a granular approach into learning the language, where, we have different levels when we speak, when we write, and, whenever we're listening. So it's going to give you ranges where the students are going to reach until they master the language, or we aim for them to master the language after we finish with the courses. The courses are going to start from an A1 level all up to a B2 level, which is something that we work within our institutions. And it's also going to be based with UNESCO's sustainability program. As you well know, right now with the 21st century and the globalization and the World Economic Forum, sustainability elements have become a crucial component and very important for our society. We want them to be aware of what's going on, and we want them to become, responsible citizens. So we're going to see that it's going to be aligned with UNESCO. It's going to provide spaces for students to develop skills that they will use for the future. And it's also going to be aligned with Bloom's taxonomy. As you well know, Bloom's taxonomy is one of the most crucial academic, or one of the elements that teachers do use whenever we're working in education. So can we go to the following slide, please? Okay, so why and who is going to need this book? You're going to see that it is for students of upper secondary from Brazil, Peru, Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, and Central America. So it's going to have a very targeted population for Latin American students, and it's going to be related to the needs that we have as a community of educators. You're going to see that it is for 3 to 5 hour program. So it is quite flexible. You're going to have, no problem whatsoever to teach it and implement it with your students, because you do have a number of activities, and notice that your aim will be up to B2 level. So you will have, the proper exams, the proper activities, and it's going to be something that will challenge the students, not only within the language component, but like I mentioned to you before, you're going to have the element of prepping the students for the future. You're going to see that it is, of course, it is an American English format, and it is going to be a 6-level program. And again, is going to be, this will be available in December 2022. So it's quite new. Nobody has it. So if you want to say, oh my God, I want to find information, you can totally contact Oserco and they will provide you with new information. You're going to see, again, like I mentioned to you before, it's going to be working with UNESCO Sustainability Development Goals, as well as Bloom's Taxonomy and 21st Century Skills. And like I mentioned to you before, all of this are combined with the aim to provide better skills for our students for their future. Nowadays, it is relevant that we prep them, as we heard from the previous speaker from yesterday. 21st century skills are a huge component into the development of our students. So we are going to consider this, and we're also going to implement the taxonomy because we want to work with a higher order thinking skills. So it's going to be something quite useful for our young adults, and it's also going to give them that that awareness of our society. The sustainability component is something that has been worked with you for all of the societies, and you will see. Now we're going to go to the next slide. Okay, sorry. So you're going to see that this course structure is going to be, again, really formatted from the Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, it's going to evaluate, it's going to create, it's going to analyze, it's going to apply, and it's going to understand and remember. Notice that we're going to go from the lowest of the skills all the way to the highest pyramid of the Bloom's taxonomy. So the idea is that the content will be developed within 36 weeks. There's going to be a number of assessments. And of course, we are aiming that the students can achieve this within 40 weeks. So it is something that will keep the students up to date. They're going to be engaged. It's not something that they're going to, oh my God, this is so boring. No, they're going to be engaged in the activities, and they're going to be able to experience contents that are relatable to them. In regards to the students, if you want to know what is it that they will have access to, they will have the students book. They're going to have the language boosters, which the language boosters are going to be additional practice that are going to really help our students out. Okay. In addition, you're going to have the digital content, which is quite useful nowadays that everybody is more into technology than they were before. And then we're going to have the teachers' information, which of course you have your teachers' resources, you have your book, you're going to still have your language boosters, and the platform that you're going to be using is quite useful. As you know, teachers and students, regardless that we know technology and are familiar with technology, we still need that resource that is quite easy for us to follow, because it can be overwhelming, whenever we're using a new resource and we're planning with a new resource. So it's something that we're going to have available. And of course, the digital element, and it's going to be very important for our students to be working with that. Okay, if we can go to the following slide, please. I think so. Okay, so notice that here the modules are going to be divided by, depending on the amount of hours that you have per week, you're going to see the amount of modules that you have, okay? So for instance, for 3 weeks, you're going to have around 50 modules. For 4 weeks, you're going to have a very similar amount of modules, and you're going to be able to work with your students in this way, okay? In addition, 90 modules. And then you're going to have the video productions. The videos are just fantastic. They're so much fun. You're going to enjoy them a lot. You're going to have a total of 18, so you can spread them out. You can really practice with them. You can help the students and let them enjoy them. And also, the nice thing about the videos is that they're going to listen to the language as it is with different accents, with different type of people. And the idea is to foster fluency, which is really important nowadays. They're going to have all the language boosters, which is going to be, again, something that will focus on the culture. They're going to be a game page. And of course, you're going to have the digital environment. Notice that learning environments are crucial to work with our students. And we're going to really develop that with hashtag. Hashtag is going to not only teach your students something new, but it's also going to give them those skills. So you're going to really create this whole dynamic and this whole environment for students to be quite engaged into what they're seeing and what they're working with. So it's not like they're going to be just learning grammar for grammar's sake or vocabulary for vocabulary's sake. They really are going to be exposed to something that will put them in a context, which is provide them a meaningful experience within their learning, life. So we're going to go to the next one. So yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, so here we're going to see again that you're going to really emphasize the Sustainable Development Goals. This is something crucial. It used to be that you have only 4 pillars from UNESCO, but now we're going to be working with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are going to be progressively implemented into the program. So the students are going to constantly be working with the sustainable goals and little by little creating a more in-depth knowledge about them. In addition, we're going to be working with Bloom's taxonomy, which is quite useful for teachers who are very familiar with the Bloom's taxonomy. You know, your lower learning skills all the way to your higher order thinking skills. And it's going to be something quite useful for those teachers that are still quite, that embrace Bloom's taxonomy a little bit more than, other types of taxonomies. The program is quite flexible in the sense that you're going to see that you can implement it in different type of days, 3 or 4 or 5, depending on the way that you want to work with it. And also the fact that you have the digital components and then you have the materials and the lesson boosters, it's going to make it quite flexible for teachers and students to explore and to learn a little bit better, because at this time, it's a lot about what we want to know and how we want to learn it. So it's going to be really aiming at that intrinsical aspect and that self-awareness of like, okay, I need to learn English because, okay? You're going to be working with the 21st century. And as you can see, it is a topic, a trend that we've noticed lately, that it is about helping students develop those soft skills, prepping them for the future and teaching them, what they need. Whenever we went to school, nobody really taught us what we wanted to do. We learned it whenever we went to university, whenever we decided what our career was going to be. But here we're starting to give students the tools that they need in order to have those soft skills, which are, in this case, communication is one of the main ones. So you're going to see that our students are going to be working with that. You're going to have task-based learning. The students are going to have specific activities that they need to do, and those are going to be, of course, something that they have to be responsible for. Okay, can we go to the next slide? I speak a little bit faster. Oh, sorry. So here you're going to have videos. Like I said, the videos are quite amazing. I am an extremely visual person. I love watching videos. I am not a very good traditional student. So here the students are going to have those videos. They're going to have a theme. And like I mentioned to you before, you're going to have that learning environment, okay? You're going to have videos, you're going to have a theme, you're going to have vocabulary. So if the teacher wants to be super creative, they can create a whole dynamic around this video, around this unit and say, oh, okay, we're going to have like a little Paris in here because learning about cultures. So you can go ahead and foster this, and all of the resources that you have will help you with it. You're going to see that you have 1 video per unit, and there are 9. In this case, there will be, the 9 videos per level. You're going to have animated videos. The actors are really nice. They're young people, different accents, which again, it's important to remember that fluency is the key for communication, for proper communication. And then you're going to have different storyboards. And of course, you're going to have recording. You're going to see that all of them, the cast, again, is super young, super relatable. If you're a young student here in the audience, then you're going to see that this is something that you might be engaged. Or if you're a teacher and you want to, get the attention of your students, then this will be something interesting for you. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so biggest issue with our teachers, with their students nowadays, they've been out, they've been working, remotely. So we need assessments. Versant is one of the assessments that we have in Pearson that will help you understand how the students are. This is, again, focusing on the global scale of English. So it's a very granular report that it gives you. I took it and it's fantastic. It will tell you, for instance, that your written, it's a C2 and your speaking is a C1 or a B2 or a B1, and your listening might be an A1. So it does give you an idea of your speaking, writing, listening, and reading skills. And it gives you a whole concept of how you're, where you're at, what is the range. Because we never are like a completely C1. We never are completely C2. We have different layers. We're like little onions. So you're going to see that happens with our assessments. So if we can move to the next slide. Okay, so this one is going to measure all of your abilities, understanding of the spoken and the written language. And you're going to see that it is about everyday topics. You're going to listen audios from different accents, British and American. It's going to be based on a time setup. The students are going to listen, they're going to have to type, they're going to have to repeat. So that is the way that we can prove that it is assessing all of the 4 skills. So the format of the test is going to be divided by different like chapters or sections where you're going to be able to assess those components. If we go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the report that you get from Versant is quite accurate. I have taken it a couple of times, so I'll tell you that it's very detailed, and I'm going to show you something about it. It is quite effective. It is very accessible for your pockets. It's not expensive, and you're going to see that, for instance, if you want to enroll to university abroad, or if you want to go to another country because it is a requirement, it does give you this general view of how you stand also with other types of assessments that you need to take in order to study abroad or, get a job abroad. So you're going to see that it is a scalable result. It will give you the specifics, and it also gives you an idea of what things you need to do in order to improve your English. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, so notice that the Versant is going to give you the scores. And like I mentioned to you before, we take a test and we're like, okay, this is the one test that I'm going to take and it's going to be a 48. But how do I know that this test is this is a question that Ludmila had for the previous speaker. She's like, well, does this relate to, TOEFL and things like that? Well, this one does. It gives you a report on how you are with the global scale of English, with the Common European Framework, with TOEFL. And you're going to see that it does give you the ranges in where they will fall or what specific frame they're going to be for each one of those types of assessments. So it gives you the overall score for the Versant, which is going to, understand your sentence mastery, your vocabulary, your fluency and pronunciation, your typing, and then you're going to get that connection with the other one. So you're going to see that GSC, Common European, TOEFL, you're going to see that report is there. You're not going to say, oh my God, I got this, but this doesn't make any sense to me. This actually will give you that report. Say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to take the TOEFL now because I know that this is my section, because some universities only take certain type of assessments. If we can go to the next one. Okay. So again, assessments, not only, at a higher age do we need assessments? We also need to assess our students, our younger students. So in this case, even though I'm going to go to, okay, thank you. Even though we're going to go, the set of assessments will help us work with our students. So this one will be a little bit more for the younger students, but we can implement it, you know, of course, for the younger set of kids. And it's going to give us a projection of what skills the students have. Some of the skills that they master, you're going to see that some are working with the Common European Framework, some of them working with American standards. So you're going to see that they're going to be working with them, and they're going to identify the skills that they're gapping, they're missing, and it's going to provide you with that resource or that gaps that the teachers do need to have available in order for them to help their students, because the assessment is not something to judge the teacher, but it is something that will provide you with the information to read and to prep them, you know, in the future. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, so who can do this? Why do we choose this type of assessments? Because we want to know where our students are. We want to help them. We don't want to throw them out there in the world without knowing what, you know, just making sure that they do it. But we're going to really give an idea of where they're standing. And as a teacher, it gives us the necessary tools to act, to help them out, to provide them, and also create an idea, like a team with the parents in order for us to work better. You're going to be able to share a certificate of achievement with the parents, and you're going to also that the format of the assessment will help the students deal with stress. Because a lot of the times, I don't know about you guys, I know maybe Ludmila is, you know, I don't know if you're with me, but I get super stressed when I'm taking a test. So here, the kids are going to be in an environment in which they're games, and they're going to really enjoy the assessment. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm all about, you know, I'm terrified of assessments. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here is going to be for the younger folks. It's going to be from 6 to 13. The levels, of course, are from A1 to B1. And of course, this one is going to be graded for Common European Framework and the Global Scale of English. Notice that both of them are going to be a constant within Pearson, as Xochitl mentioned yesterday, because one feeds the other. So you're going to see that the teachers will still have that Common European Framework that they're so familiar with, but they're also going to have the added bonus of the Global Scale of English. So the results are going to be within minutes, and the students are going to be super engaged. So we can go to the next slide. So now, my students are coming from different parts of the world, different levels, they're different. So here, I'm sorry, that one. Yeah, so the levels are going to give me that approach. It's going to make me understand where is my starting point and what is my ending point. Thank you so much, I'm sorry. So you're going to see the levels will help with those components. And again, you're going to notice that all of our assessments, all of our tool assessments, or family of assessments, I don't know how you want to call it, are going to really aim into understanding where our students are starting and where our students are ending. So we want to have that entire image within those different windows where we can really provide them with the necessary tools, like I mentioned to you before, and help them out into improving their language acquisition. We want to help them. We want to identify the gaps that they have, and we want to offer them the best solution possible, not only for the student, but for the parent and for the teacher. Okay, I don't know. I'm very time oriented, so I know I had a certain amount of minutes. So I don't know if you have any questions.
Hi, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Professor Nancy. Yes, I was wondering because after you were presenting your books, you mentioned the parents are they involved in the whole process with the books? They are like, yes, like they like take part of the teaching process?
Well, in this case, the results of the assessments that parents have access to, it is important. I always, as an educator, I believe that parents should be involved all the time in the education of their students. They do have the information. Of course, this is managed within the classrooms, but it's important for parents to be involved, especially whenever we're talking about assessments such as level and benchmark, because we want them to help their students at a young age. And this is, if you want to create a successful learning environment, you have to create a community. It's one person that is affected by everybody around them.
Yeah, and you're totally right. I also get a bit nervous every time that I have to take a test. It's pretty normal, I guess. Yeah.
All right.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I think we don't have any other questions right now. But anyway, if there are any other questions, we let you know at the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Muy interesante toda esta información que nos compartieron ahorita. ¿Qué les ha parecido hasta ahora nuestra jornada? Realmente hemos visto material de primera calidad. Recuerden que tenemos un espacio especial para responder todas sus dudas. Pueden dejarlas en el chat y luego les estaremos respondiendo. No olviden participar en el concurso. Es muy fácil. Solo deben acompañarnos durante nuestra feria virtual y seguir a Oserco en su cuenta de Instagram, @OsercoBooks. Y no dejen de visitar su página web www.osercobooks.com. Allí podrán ver su catálogo de libros con precios de regalos en todas las categorías. Ahora le damos la bienvenida a nuestro cuarto exponente, representante de la prestigiosa editorial Merriam-Webster, Peter Sokolowski. Peter Sokolowski joined Merriam-Webster in 1994 as the company's first French language editor and has since written definitions for many of the company's dictionaries. He also contributes blog articles, podcasts, and videos for the online dictionary. And his writing has appeared in Slate, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. He is a frequent guest on national radio and television and was named among Time's 140 best Twitter feeds of 2013. He leads workshops on dictionaries and the English language for the U.S. State Department, serves as pronouncer for Spelling Bees Worldwide, and as a judge for the Scripps National Spelling Bee. He is the co-host of the Word Master and podcast about words by dictionary editors. Peter attended the University of Paris and earned his MA in French literature at the University of Massachusetts. He is also a freelance musician and a music host of New England Public Radio. Thank you, Professor Peter, for being here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, and I wish I were there in person, of course, someday soon, perhaps. And we are going to talk about dictionaries, and we're going to talk about dictionaries in a little bit of detail. And we're going to go through a number of dictionaries good for the students in the middle and secondary level. And we start with this slide because this is where it starts, I think, for many students, maybe for many teachers, certainly for me, and also historically for dictionaries of English, which is to say bilingual dictionaries. There were bilingual dictionaries in England for many, many years before there was ever a dictionary, a monolingual dictionary as we understand it today. And in fact, it wasn't until about 1600 that there was a dictionary written for that was just a monolingual dictionary. Before that, everything was bilingual, often Latin and English, French and English, Italian and English, Spanish and English. And that is where we often start as language learners. And I love bilingual dictionaries. I helped to write the French bilingual dictionary. And we're very proud of our Spanish bilingual dictionary. And I know that students should and often can move on to monolingual dictionaries, and we're going to look at where they should go in their development. But we're going to start here because this is a familiar place, and many teachers know that bilingual dictionaries help at the beginning and also are consulted throughout our lives. And what's interesting about our bilingual dictionary, our Spanish dictionary, now in its second edition, is that it was entirely based on corpus research of New World Spanish, Spanish of Latin America. And that's very different from most other dictionaries by major publishers, which are essentially European based. And often what you find is not only more British English, but you also find very much an orientation toward European Spanish. So that's something we're proud of about Merriam-Webster, because we are a New World English dictionary. We made a New World Spanish bilingual dictionary. So if we can go to the next slide, we can look at some of the pages. They look like this. This is hard to see for you, but I want to show you some examples. So go to the next slide and we'll see, I think we can read, some examples that we can read. Well, there are some of these examples from the previous slide, and I don't have them right with me. I will have them tomorrow to show you, that have the labels of different regions. And so some of them are labeled Venezuela, some of them are labeled Colombia. You see some here on this page. If you look down to almost to the end of the left-hand margin, you see a Mexican label. So that we do, even though this is a small paperback that is affordable, that can be used in schools, that can be used at home, you can carry it with you when you travel. It does give you that usage orientation of what we call regional orientation. So that you have that idea of, this is a word used in the Caribbean, in Puerto Rico, in Venezuela, in Argentina, in Mexico. So this is a dictionary that is small, but it is very well edited. It's very recently edited. It's very fresh, and it's also in its research based on the Latin American Spanish, and that really does make a big difference in the long run. So with our next slide, we'll go very briefly to a much smaller dictionary. This was made for the American market, but there may be a use for this for you as teachers and for your students as well. This is a small dictionary that was made for testing. That is to say, sometimes in testing situations, the students are allowed their dictionary, but in the United States, it was requested to have dictionaries that have the words translation and only the words translation. In other words, no extra information, none of the grammatical information or the collocations or the phrasal verbs or the idioms, all of the good stuff that we're going to get to in just a minute. Sometimes for some teachers, they want just simply the translations. And that's what this dictionary is for. It's a very affordable, inexpensive dictionary. It's a very new dictionary. Take a look at it sometimes. It may serve an important role for a certain kind of student or a certain kind of situation for many teachers. And so again, it was made for that testing situation, a very unusual dictionary in that way, because unlike the bigger one, where we tried to put as much information as possible, this one has a very strictly limited amount of translation information. So to the next slide. And so it looks like this. It looks very, very straightforward. You see that there are translations, but you do not see example sentences. You do not see idioms and collocations and grammar. And again, we will get to all of that, and we have dedicated large books and websites to that information. But sometimes there's an appropriate place to have a straightforward and a limited vocabulary dictionary, and that's what this is for. So to our next slide. So what's also kind of fun, and for certain ages may be really important, is to add that visual element to a dictionary. And so we make this dictionary, it's a beautiful dictionary. It's a fairly large one. It's large in trim size. We can go to the next page to look inside, and you see the images. There are these beautiful images that correspond to entries on those pages. So you see, in the case of dictionary illustrations, some of the best illustrations are plants, fruit, and animals, because those are things that don't age and become dated looking. And they are fascinating to look at and also have multiple parts. So we see with the spider, the different parts of the spider, including the web, the words for those terms. And then for the different kinds of fruit, the different kinds of what we call stone fruit. So you have nectarines and peaches and cherries. And so you're able to compare them. And what I love about this is also compare their relative sizes. So this is an attractive book. It's a colorful book. It's a fun book to hold. It's in a kind of a sturdy, soft binding. And so this is a great book for young students who enjoy having that visual element in their dictionary. And of course, we all know this, that if you have an image that is compelling like this, it often helps your memory. It helps trigger your memory and your understanding of these terms. And so that's why these terms, and you can see, by the way, the headwords are highlighted on the page that correspond to the illustrations. So this is a book that we love. And again, it's got recent research. It's Latin American Spanish. And again, illustrated for maybe a younger student. Although I have to say, I love these books, so that it's not exclusively for younger students. So to our next slide. Now, as we go into the school years, there are a few dictionaries that we make that are appropriate for school-age students, and it's important for me to mention, though, that these are dictionaries that we have to understand. These are different from dictionaries written for learners. We're going to get to that in just a moment, but these dictionaries were written for young students, and many of the students who use these dictionaries grew up speaking English in the home. So there is a limited vocabulary. These are plain language definitions. They're very clear with lots of good illustrations, engravings, and example sentences. However, these are not written for learners of English. So they can be very helpful for ambitious and advanced students at a young age. Let's take a look at one of these pages with the next slide. So you can see they have the wonderful, those classic illustrations. 70,000 entries is a good sized dictionary. This is a good dictionary for a middle school student, a student who is 13 or 14 or 15 years old. A lot of examples of usage, and 1,000 little drawings or illustrations, and occasionally those word history paragraphs and synonyms for extra information about these words. The definitions are fairly straightforward and fairly easy to read. Can we, on the next slide, I think we have an example. I forget, I did so many slides that I don't remember. Okay, no, this goes to the next one. That's okay. So now, if your students are prepared for this dictionary and they move on into high school, the next slide will show us the next dictionary chronologically that was made for high school students. And again, go to the next slide. We'll take a look at 100,000 entries, a very 100,000 definitions, a very comprehensive dictionary. And we have the word history that we can read here. So that gets into some of the great fun etymology that we like if we're language lovers. Again, but this is information that is often more detailed and more in-depth than would be wanted for a learner, a learner who is unfamiliar with a lot of the words used in the definitions of this dictionary, which is why we also make dictionaries for learners. But this is made originally for high school students. And if you have ambitious readers, successful students, students who are going to study abroad in an English-speaking country, or who are taking English courses in the various subject areas, that could be literature, could be science, could be history. This is an excellent dictionary for those kinds of students of sort of special subjects. So to the next slide. And this is the elementary dictionary. I put them in the wrong order, I'm sorry, but this was made for younger students. But let's go to the next slide and we'll take a look at what this looks like. This is for younger students. You'll see it's more colorful and it has photographs as well as illustrations. And I put them chronologically in the wrong order, but I think you understand there are 3 in this sequence that will lead to the college level dictionary. And this is really the one for the younger students or for the classroom, a hardcover dictionary that could be used for teachers or students. This is the dictionary that is originally written for those younger students who are 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 years of age and who are studying English. But often, again, keep in mind, these definitions were written for children who grew up hearing and speaking English at home. So wait for the Learner's Dictionary, because we're getting to the ESL Dictionary in just a moment. So to the next slide. So yes, and these little paragraphs, these are great for teachers because first of all, you have a little section on the sounds of every single letter of the alphabet. This is fascinating. And of course, English is difficult to spell. We all know that. It's unlike Spanish, which is much more phonetically regular. And so when, in this case, for example, with S, you do have the idea of a voiced S sound, like a Z sound, and the double S sound that we encounter. So you, in this little box, it says the sounds of S, the letter S most commonly makes the sound heard in sand first and streets. In some words, especially at the ends of words, S sounds like a Z, as in easy, words, and dries. Those are important sounds to practice and to learn. And of course, those are different sounds for many speakers of Spanish. And so that's an important lesson to learn, that phonetic lesson. And now, of course, this letter combines with H. So it makes the sound we hear in share, S alone or with a second S, is also makes this sound like sugar or pressure. And again, these are important phonetic lessons to learn for any learner of English. And another sound is the one heard in words like measure and confusion. We usually indicate this with a ZH as a transcription. And then, of course, it's also a silent letter, as in the words island. And so S is a complicated letter with a lot of different sounds. And so a lesson could be made, or a group of lessons, on just the sound of this letter. And then, of course, there are the rest of the alphabet to go through. Also, this dictionary has these little word history paragraphs, in this case, soccer, to explain this word and how it's used and its history. So there's lots of good little storytelling about words, about letters in this dictionary. It's one of our favorite and best-selling dictionaries. So to the next slide. Also, so there are quizzes here. The synonym paragraphs are great. Again, it makes a lesson all by itself. So with the word seek, for example, we have seek and we have search and we have hunt. And those are all words that a student can learn in the first 2 years. And yet, how do you distinguish them? It's great to have a little paragraph that makes these semantic distinctions like this. These 3 words mean to look for something. Seek may be used in looking for either material or mental things. She's seeking new friends, or I seek the truth. Search is used when looking for something in a very careful or thorough way. We searched all over the house. And then hunt is used for a long pursuit. I hunted all day. Or I was hunting birds. And so this is a fascinating look into the way that words are used. Usage is what we call this in the dictionary business. And so we have for these synonyms little paragraphs. And then, of course, head scratchers. These are just kind of indications of the way that English, it can be confusing and also amusing. We have head scratcher. You can slow up and you can also slow down. These phrasal verbs that are so bewildering in English because they can seem like opposites when sometimes they mean the same thing, as in this case. And in this case, of course, also we have the word short. So what word becomes shorter when you add 2 letters to it? Short. So it's a little quiz, a little joke using the words. And again, these are resources that a teacher can use. If you have this on your desk, you can make a small lesson based on just the sounds of a letter, the sounds of different words, the words' histories, and their synonyms. So the dictionary can be a textbook for language, which is what I always say. So we can go to the next slide. Now we get to a dictionary that was created specifically for learners of English. Now, many of you are familiar with this kind of dictionary. I'm very proud that I was on the staff of this particular dictionary, so I wrote many of these definitions, and I'm very proud of this book, and I love it. It's the first dictionary made entirely in the United States, and made for learners of English, for learners who did not grow up speaking English at home. To give that extra help to, first of all, there are 3 important differences between this dictionary and a comprehensive dictionary that is monolingual, that is not written in this way. The 3 big differences are the definitions are written in plain English, in a simple vocabulary of about 3,000 words, so that a student in the end of the first year, the beginning of the second year, can read and understand the definitions of 100,000 words. So that is the most important difference. The second difference is that this dictionary has an enormous number of example sentences, because you need the context, you need the syntax, you need the register, you need to see how a word is used. Now, I know as a fluent speaker of another language, of French, that when I'm looking up a word in a French dictionary, it's often not for the translation, not for the meaning, but for the preposition. It's for the collocation. It's for the word that comes after, right? And we all know that this is true. And that's what this dictionary does better than any other dictionary ever made in the United States. And the third difference is that this dictionary has a comprehensive accounting of idioms in the English language. So let's take a look at the next slide, and we can see what some of these examples are. So here's what a page spread looks like. The blue or green represent the example sentences, and the black are the definitions. So it's very easy to see that the blue sentences are the examples, and the black sentences are the definitions, which makes this dictionary easy to use and easy to read. There are many, many examples and of idioms. I think on the next slide, let's take a look. And we can see, for example, these great illustrations of the different kinds of cats on the left and different kinds of percussion instruments on the right. And so you have the advantage of those illustrations, in addition to all of the lexical and semantic and idiomatic information in this dictionary. So yeah, take a look at the next slide. We can see how that looks. Okay, now we made a smaller version of this dictionary, one that is easier to carry. Many people asked us, in fact, I think initially it was the United States government that wanted a smaller dictionary for learners. So this is an abridgment of the bigger one. We can go to the next slide and take a look at what it looks like. It has all of the same information. It's presented in smaller pages, so it's a little bit harder to read. In this case, the example sentences are presented in italics. So you can see the italics in there, and those pages are very crammed. They're full of information, but that's part of having as much information as possible in a small paperback dictionary. So this, in many ways, is the best value because it's less expensive, but it has much of the same information. So you can go to the next page, next slide. Now, for fun, a lot of teachers love this dictionary, and this is a fun dictionary. If you know Garfield, a very famous comic strip in the United States, this is a dictionary that is that has, in addition to the definitions, it also has comic strips that illustrate a certain word on a given page. So if we look at the next slide, we'll see a couple examples, I think. Yes, so we can make this bigger, and we can see that we have lasagna, I think, is on the right. And we have a couple of comics on the left. So you can see on every page where the comic uses a given word, that word's definition is on that page. So it's a fun dictionary. It's a very big seller in the United States, and people love this. It's also great if you're a teacher. Now you have access to all of these cartoons that show you idiomatic usage of a given word, a little fun cartoon, but also cartoons show something that's very important, which is informal, conversational American English. So that these, these are very famous cartoons culturally. Garfield is very famous, but also the language in the cartoon. It's a very word-based linguistic jokes in these cartoons, and so you as a teacher could use these again for lessons or for small investigations of words. So go to the next slide. Now, if you want to dig a little deeper, we have the vocabulary builder. This is a great way to study. This is the way that in the United States, a lot of the students study for the spelling bee, for the big spelling competitions. So go to the next page and we'll show you how this works. These are lessons that are already made. So in this case, the lesson is the root vor, V-O-R, which means to eat. And it's the root of words like carnivorous or herbivorous. So that if you learn the root and where it comes from Greek or Latin, and of course the Latin roots will all resonate with your Spanish speakers, they will all be the same, but then it provides 4 or 5 English words that derive directly from those roots. And so can we go to the next page and see? So then there are also quizzes based upon those lessons so that you as a teacher can simply use the quizzes from this book. By the way, so you know, the answers are all in the back of the book, so that you can use this book for yourself in class, for your students at home, or for yourselves to improve your vocabulary. This is one of the best-selling paperback books that we publish, and it's principally purchased, I believe, by adults in the United States who simply want to improve their vocabulary. And so it's a fun book for self-study. It's also a great book for directed study by teachers. So go to the next slide. We'll see what we have here. Yeah, so this is a better view. So we can see hyder from the Greek, meaning water, and hydraulic is a common word in English. We give you the definition, and then we give you an example sentence and how it's used, and then, of course, quizzes after it. So this is a great sort of self-guided tour through etymology, but etymology sometimes sounds like it's too serious or deep or difficult. This is an easy way to approach the study of the roots of words and to realize that words, of course, grow from each other. And so your vocabulary grows from the knowledge of these roots. You learn one root, in this case, you learn 5 words of English, but of course, those can grow and grow. And so can we go to the next slide? We'll see. I don't know how many, I forgot how many slides there were. And again, here's more of those words: dehydrate, hydroelectric, hydroponic, more of the words. So just to make that point, that studying with this book is easy and self-directed, but for a teacher, it can provide lessons for you. So on to the next slide. And here's more of the quizzes. Yeah, on to the next slide. I did more slides. Now, for just to kind of wrap up and to show that you know, dictionary publishing has been a very long journey. As I said, the first English language dictionaries in London are almost 400 years, or a little bit more than 400 years ago. And now, of course, our dictionaries are online. There's a great dictionary at merriam-webster.com, which is one of the best visited websites in the United States. But there's also this dictionary, which you can find at Britannica Dictionary or learnersdictionary.com. And this is an online version of our Advanced Learners English Dictionary. The definitions and the examples and the idioms are all there. This has something else, though. It has the audio. You can click on a word and hear the words pronounced. And so you can hear that audio and use that audio in a classroom situation. You can use this dictionary on your phone or anywhere you are. It's free to be used. It has little ads, as you see on the side. So this is a dictionary that you can use to augment your study, to study at home, to recommend to your students. And again, it has the same definitions as in our big Advanced Learners Dictionary. And all of those example sentences and all of those idioms, they're all presented here. You can go to the next slide and we can see, I think, another image of the, oh yes, it also provides the word of the day, which you can subscribe to. You can get word of the day through Merriam-Webster via email. You can get it as a podcast. And as a podcast, many teachers in the United States use it to listen to, again, you're listening to the voice speak the definition and the examples. The voice in our podcast for word of the day happens to be my voice. I record it right here. And I've been recording the word of the day since 2006. So I think it's about 6,000 days in a row. And many teachers use it in classrooms. They'll play, it's just a 2-minute podcast every single day. Here's the word, here's its definition, here's what it means. Now, again, that word of the day podcast through Merriam-Webster was not designed for English language learners, but it's for everybody, and it could be great in your classroom as well, especially for advanced students. But again, part of it is to connect the sound of the words with a rhythm and a cadence of a native speaker. And of course, you learn a new definition and a new word every day, which is great fun. So I think you go to the next slide, or that may be our final slide. And if that's our last slide, then I'm happy to hear questions. A reminder that tomorrow I'll be speaking about more advanced dictionaries for learners. And I'm going to be giving a special talk at the end of this conference about idioms, particularly American English idioms, how to teach them, how to learn them, how to encounter them, where to find them. And I consider idioms to be one of the most important linguistic lessons that we can give to students, mostly because idioms are culturally based, they're culturally specific, and they're very often, of course, not based on the strict meanings of the words themselves. So for an example, I could say, I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. It's a very common idiom in American English, and yet it doesn't mean I'm hungry for the meat of a horse. And so there are many others that you know and that you teach. For example, a piece of cake means something is very easy. It doesn't mean it's dessert. And so we want to talk about that kind of use of language, which is such an important part of not only informing your students, but also, I think, treating them as intelligent and developing learners, that they can recognize that language can be metaphor, that language can be symbol, that language can be story, and not just translation. And I think that takes a student, even in the first year, to the next level. In their own mind, they recognize, aha, I learned the word cake. I know what that word means as a translation, but then I learned the idiom piece of cake. So I've learned a big piece of American idiomatic English with that lesson. And so that's what our keynote will be tomorrow evening. So I hope you can join me for that as well. Are there any questions?
Hi, hello, Mr. Peter. Thank you very much. Yeah, well, there were some questions. There's one that someone asked what would you recommend? Should every student have their own dictionary, or do you think that's better to have like a pile of dictionaries in the classroom, or should they have their own to take back and forward to their homes? What do you think? What's your opinion on?
Yeah, it depends on the age of the student and their development, of course. If it's a serious student who is in the second or third year already, then I would always say the advanced learners dictionary should be at home with them. The reason that dictionary was written was so that the student can get the answer when you, the teacher, are not with them. In other words, you're teaching them how to use a dictionary by example in the classroom, but then when they are home doing their homework, they should be able to do that mechanical thing of opening up a book, finding the answer by themselves, reading that definition and understanding it on their own. That dictionary was written for that exact purpose, so that if you are in a classroom where you can afford that dictionary for every student, they should have it at their home. And then one copy in the classroom, of course, for consulting. Or if they're doing projects with groups, they can share a copy. And so again, maybe for a very young student, they might have a smaller dictionary for their own and the bigger one in the classroom. But if they're a serious student and they're into the second year, they should have that advanced learners, at home for homework, so they can do it on their own and very importantly, have the satisfaction of the process of learning without you there, because they do it with you in person in class, but then they have to replicate, they have to reproduce that same intellectual action by themselves, at least a little bit on their own. And maybe they'll be curious when they're watching YouTube or watching a movie or reading a book, and then they'll go to their dictionary. And that's why it should be close at hand and should be at home.
Thank you. Well, I personally love dictionaries. I don't know, but I love them. They're so special. Thank you very much. So I'm looking forward to see you tomorrow. That's amazing what you're telling us. Bueno, muchísimas gracias. You're welcome. Muchísimas gracias al señor Peter, de verdad, increíble. Si se dedican a la enseñanza de idiomas, ¿no están seguros qué material didáctico se adapta mejor a tus necesidades? Oserco brinda asesoría personalizada y de calidad para colegas y profesores con la finalidad de satisfacer las necesidades tanto de alumnos como personal docente. Recuerden que tenemos un concurso especial para ustedes. Es muy sencillo participar. Solo deben acompañarnos durante la feria virtual vía Zoom y seguir a Oserco en su cuenta de Instagram, @OsercoBooks. Solo eso y ya estarás participando. Bueno, a continuación vamos a darle nuevamente la bienvenida a nuestra expositora Nicole Stephen. Nicole is a National Academic Consultant with Sadler School. She is a licensed teacher certified in grades 1 to 6 and special education from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Nicole has worked for Sadler for over 6 years. First as a sales representative in the New England area and more recently as a national consultant supporting teacher as they learn about Sadler's academic programs. Well, thank you, Nicole, for being with us again.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited to present today on one of my favorite topics, effective grammar and writing instruction. So today we want to talk about, next slide, please. Today, we want to talk through a few different routines, and I want to introduce you to some ways that you can teach grammar in the classroom effectively. But we also want to talk about why we teach grammar. What's the research behind that type of instruction? And what does a strong grammar routine look like? I'll give you a couple of examples there, some things that you may want to think about implementing in your own class. And we'll look closely at how teachers implement this in class. What do those strong instructional routines look like? And then finally, we'll close with how can teachers make grammar and writing fun and engaging. So a couple of ideas about some games that you might want to implement and some resources that you can access online on sadlerconnect.com that are complimentary and will help you with effective instruction in class. Next slide. So what does the research tell us about how students learn grammar? So researchers know that extensive reading and writing is important to grammar instruction because students read and acquire knowledge of grammar based on their comprehension skills, but explicit instruction is really crucial for students to master the conventions of written English. So there are 3 effective strategies that we recommend for improving students' grammar acquisition. And those are sentence combining, sentence expansion, and sentence imitation. So a strong grammar routine is going to include those 3 components. Next slide. So how should we guide that grammar instruction? If students are really going to internalize the standards of written English and be able to apply those in the context of their own writing, we first need to make sure that they're introduced to the basic parts of speech so that they have a context which to begin their discussion of grammar concepts. So what that really means is that you need to start from the beginning. So following a grammar instruction in sequence, in a developmental sequence would be most appropriate. You also want to ensure that you are placing the importance of grammar instruction within the framework of the student's own writing. So what this means is that teaching grammar in isolation, so giving students instruction on a specific grammar skill and then moving on to the next, is not as effective as making sure that students have an opportunity to work with the grammar skill that you've taught in the context of their own writing. So they're taught the skill and then they're applying it independently. But so why do we teach grammar? It's important to, researchers agree that extensive reading and writing is important to grammar acquisition, but we know that students need to master the conventions of English, written English, to communicate effectively, both in their speaking and their writing. Next slide. So I'd like to pose a question to the group. If you could share with me, how are you teaching grammar in your classroom today? So this is applicable to small group instruction, whole class instruction. How are you providing grammar instruction? Part of your writing block? Is it using mini lessons? There are a variety of ways. Can you go back, please? Oops, sorry. Keep going, go back again. There we go. Did anyone answer the question in the chat? No, so there are a variety of ways that you can, again, you can teach grammar in your classroom today. So whether that's part of an explicit routine, that may be part of a core English language arts program that your school has purchased. There's a lot of grammar instruction embedded there. Sometimes supplemental resources will offer some key grammar instruction, but really there are some best practices as far as instruction that I want to share with you. So next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about the elements of strong grammar instruction. You want to make sure that you're focusing your instruction on a specific skill. So having students exposed to a variety of skills as you're trying to help improve their writing could be confusing. You want to make sure you focus your instruction. A great way to give grammar instruction is to use a mini lesson to teach the concept. So a mini lesson is that quick 10 minutes of instruction that students are introduced to the new concept. There's opportunity for practice with the new concept, and then we're asking students to write and apply the new concept. So those are the elements of strong grammar instruction. You want to focus that really clearly on one specific skill, teach it in a short mini lesson in a 10-minute increment, and then have students have an opportunity to immediately apply that authentically. Next slide. So if we're using that effective strategy of a mini lesson, what does that 10 minutes look like? So you want students to learn about the grammar skill. This is where you, as the teacher, do the modeling. So you're going to model the use of that skill correctly for students, explain to them the concept of the grammar skill and provide that model. You'll then move into scaffolded practice. And when I say scaffolded practice, we want to make sure that students receive the guidance that they need to apply the skill. So we don't just say to students, okay, I've modeled it for you, now you go and apply it in your own writing. We give them opportunities to practice it and give them an entry place. If they're struggling, we make sure that we provide support and we give them ample opportunity to practice that skill. And then you're going to evaluate student writing. So you're looking for students to make sure in their own authentic writing, that pieces that they produced in class, to make sure that you're noticing that the grammar skill is applied correctly in the context of their own writing. Next slide. So let's take a look at a mini lesson example. So here is an example of present tense verbs in one particular lesson, and then moving on to more challenging, where lesson 14 says more present tense verbs. So the way that these mini lessons are presented is that first we focus on present tense verbs, and then the next mini lesson we go deeper. So we're deepening students' understanding of present tense verbs as they continue to work with that particular grammar skill. So we've set our objectives. We know that we want students to be able to write present tense verbs that align with the subjects. And then our next objective for the next day is we're going to deepen students' understanding of writing present tense verbs that agree with their subjects. So again, that 3-step model that I talked about, the learn, practice, and apply, that is outlined here for you. And we give plenty of support in the program that Xavier offers in terms of giving some guidance for teachers to model that particular example, gives opportunity for practice, multiple opportunities for practice. And then the follow-up section is the application. So that's the authentic writing component. So I like to highlight this particular example because it does nicely show the progression of skills. We want to make sure that if we're providing grammar instruction year over year, that we are deepening students' understanding of that grammar skill. So it's not the same mini lesson each year. We're moving on to making sure that students have a deeper understanding. Okay, next slide, please. So here's a closer look at what a mini lesson might look like. And this is step 1, following the 3-step lesson plan: learn, practice, and apply. And it's here that you would teach your mini lesson. So this is all that you're given for your mini lesson, this small little instructional block. And we're going to focus today on action verbs. And you might want to give some examples of action verbs to students and say, today I'm going to introduce you to action verbs. And we're going to learn more about how every sentence has a subject and a predicate. And the verb is the main word in the predicate. So first we're going to say to students, where's the subject? Help them identify the subject. Where's the predicate? Help them identify that predicate. You may want to have volunteers add new predicates that contain other action verbs. You can create other subject sentence stems here. So where we have two examples, the skier and her bright blue skis, maybe as part of the extension to the mini lesson, you add additional subjects and students generate additional predicates for practice. So you are modeling and students are completing the additional pieces for you. You could even have students turn and talk to each other and have one group of students create subjects and the other create predicates. So there's lots of opportunities here for collaboration. And of course, this is your component. You are modeling for students how the subject and the predicate and the verb is the main word in the predicate. So the verb is the word that shows the action. You want students to understand an action verb tells what the subject does or did. So what did the skier do? He zoomed down the slope. What did her bright blue skis do? They flashed in the sunlight. So those are the opportunities that you have to model for students. Okay, next slide. When you're thinking about practice, again, we want to make sure that we are scaffolding this student practice. So a great way to do that is to use a particular program that provides the scaffolded practice. Otherwise, teachers are faced with looking for resources online or potentially even creating it on their own. And we all know that that is a challenge that teachers face often in the classroom. They have to look for their own resources or make them up on their own. So this is a great way for you to have access to that scaffolded practice. These are labeled A through D, with A being the easiest type of practice. So in this case, we have this subject and the verb agreement here. So this is an easy practice opportunity for students. You can guide students through this practice opportunity. They can do it independently. Next slide, please. As you move on to practice set B, this becomes a little bit more challenging. So we want to see, are students able to deepen their understanding of the grammar concept that you just introduced them to? A way for you to work through this with students, if they find this to be challenging, you can model completing the first few of these exercises. So maybe you complete exercises 1 and 2 together. Students complete exercise 3 and 4 with a partner, and then move on to complete the remaining exercises independently. So that's a great way to help them get started with this particular exercise. Next slide. And we're going to continue to move on and deepen our work with that particular grammar skill. So here is one where there's an item bank here. We have a reminder up here at the top of our page. We want to step in and remind students about the key components of that particular skill. So it tells us right here, the verb often shows an action. So the verb is the action. And we want students to remember and be able to apply that knowledge. Next slide. And finally, one of the most important components of your grammar instruction. Remember that high impact routine of learn, practice, and write, with write being the final step in your routine. This is where you want to have students write their own sentences. They're going to generate sentences using a prompt. Now, many skilled teachers will make up their own writing prompts, and they'll say to students, I want to make sure that you use a variety of present tense verbs. I want to see action verbs. They will tell students the criteria in which they want them to use the particular grammar skill that they've introduced, but we do that for you right here. So a great way for you to use this resource, it tells us to have students write 5 sentences about a summer sports festival. Students use action verbs in the sentences, and if they need suggestions, they can go back and use the model that was in the previous exercises. So that's another great way to help support students who may be struggling with that type of application. They can go back and use the resource previously. One other thing that I want to point out that often skilled teachers do at the end of a mini lesson or the end of an exercise is they have students go back and do a self-assessment. So something like this particular example where it says a proofreading checklist, it says, did you add a predicate to complete extensions? Did you begin each predicate with an action verb? We are going back and making sure that we have applied the skill or concept that we have instructed students to do. So this is a way for them to self-check. You're going to go and you're going to assess their work as well, but here's a way for students to do a self-assessment. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about writer's workshop. So high quality writing instruction is often done with a writer's workshop model. And so here's within the writer's workshop, you would introduce students to a genre of writing. So say you wanted to work on the narrative form of writing. You'd provide students with multiple opportunities to view narrative writing pieces. You as the teacher would collect those writing pieces and provide them to students, give them multiple examples, talk about the elements of the narrative piece, and then introduce students to how to write the narrative on their own, with the end goal being for them to produce a narrative that they have created. So that's the writer's workshop model. And many teachers lead this writer's workshop model based on resources that they've pulled from multiple areas. Next slide, please. But there is a great way to follow a best practice for writer's workshop within the Grammar for Writing program. So grammar and writing go hand in hand. So the grammar instruction is of that high quality explicit instruction where you're teaching the skill. And then the writer's workshop, this is the application piece. This is where we're going to see students putting to use all of those grammar skills that you've introduced them to. So this particular genre is on a persuasive essay. And this is an example from the upper grade levels. So the persuasive essay is going to include a lot of elements. You're going to introduce students to all of the elements of a persuasive essay and give them multiple examples. Talk to them about the key features of a persuasive essay. Again, this can be on any genre. So it could be opinion piece, it could be a narrative. This persuasive essay for grade 8 is a great opportunity for students to write that opinion piece, the persuasive essay. It's going to include all of the key features, and you're going to walk students through the entire writing process, start to finish. So you begin by having students do their pre-writing. Talk to them about how to select a topic. Walk them through the pros and cons about picking one topic over the other. Next slide. You'll continue with the pre-writing process, and students will have an opportunity to create a draft. We want them to use graphic organizers to create a different outline. So you can use a writing model following the best practices for a persuasive essay. Next slide. Once students have created an original draft and finished that pre-writing process, you'll walk them through the revising process. This is an opportunity for collaboration. So you want to make sure that students have an opportunity to work with a partner for revision. Next slide. And then this is going to be the editing and proofreading portion. You'll produce a checklist. Skilled teachers typically have checklists for editing and proofreading. This may be a great opportunity for you to partner with your students and model some proofreading that you might be willing to participate in with your students. If you're having an opportunity for a conference with your students, that's a great place to do that as you're providing that support for the editing. And then finally, the final step of the writer's workshop is the publishing and presenting. So you'll model that for students. What does publishing your final piece of work look like? And make sure that you're using all of those grammar conventions of standard English appropriately throughout the piece. Next slide. And finally, on presenting, this is an opportunity for students to present their work from the class and gain feedback on their persuasive essay. So I also want to talk through quickly about the model for the writing application piece. So this is going to take you through a different genre of writing. This one's called a friendly letter. So outlining the friendly letter, making sure that students understand all the key features of this form of writing, and making sure that they can apply the correct grammar to the friendly letter. Next slide, please. Students will keep working on the writing process here, making sure that they're using informal language versus formal language. That's an important consideration when you're deciding to create this letter. And this is a very important skill. So depending on the grade level, we'll introduce students to the specific writing skills that you want them to know and understand how to apply. So that varies by grade level. Depending on the standards that you are using. This one does have students writing the letters in 8th grade. And then you'll have students give them a writing checklist. Next slide. One of the most important things to think about after you have provided some instruction is to allow students to use self-assessment in the classroom. So I want you to think for a minute, how have you used self-assessment in your classroom? Do you give students the opportunity to go back and ensure that they've met the objectives that you've set out? So there are many different ways that you can do this. You can make a quick checklist. You as the teacher could go in and check with students and have them do a self-assessment. Next slide. So the reason why self-assessment matters is that we really want students to understand the outcomes. So you share with them the objectives when you first begin the lesson, but you want them to be able to go back and circle back to those objectives and make sure that they've understood the outcome. So if the objective of your lesson was that students are going to be able to use present tense verbs by the end of this lesson, your self-assessment would include having students monitor their writing for present tense verbs, making sure that they understood the outcome of the lesson. You also want to remember that self-assessment builds critical thinking skills. We are guiding students to be able to monitor progress and complete tasks. So if you provide them with a checklist so that they can monitor their completion of these tasks, that's a great way for self-assessment to contribute to their critical thinking skills. And it's also another opportunity for students to work collaboratively. So students can pair up throughout this self-assessment process and say to each other, did you complete that task? Did you complete that task? And go through the checklist together. They can also share out ways in which they have evidence of completing the task. Next slide. A proofreading checklist such as this is great evidence of a self-assessment. So the self-assessments are applicable to the evidence of the writing. They're applicable to, there can be applicable in math. There's a lot of different opportunities to use self-assessment. This particular one is related to grammar workshop and writing genres. But here's a great way for students to go into their authentic writing piece and say, how is my grammar and usage? Does it meet all of the criteria on this checklist? What about my punctuation and capitalization? Did I meet all the criteria for that? Then they can again work with a partner and kind of share that responsibility and have an opportunity for that collaboration. So the self-assessment really does play a key role in making sure that students are held accountable and that they feel confident in what they've completed. Next slide. Another great way to help students get engaged with grammar, get engaged with writing, is to have them play games with grammar. So this one is called Get Shaken with Adverbs. Next slide. And students have a game piece. So this would be something that you could print out and laminate for use in class, or you could put it up on the board. It's a great way to get students engaged. But depending on the sentence generator, students have to suggest predicates with the correct adverb to make sure that the subject and the predicate agree. So this is a game. Students can pair up or they can work in groups to make sure that they're active and engaged in class, so that when you're providing that grammar instruction, you give the mini lesson, there's practice and application, but there's also some fun and engagement with it as well. Next slide. Next slide. I want to highlight for you that you are more than welcome to access our free student and family resources related to both grammar and writing instruction for grades K through 12 on the student and family resources link on sadlyerconnect.com. So if you go to www.sadlyerconnect.com, there's a purple box in the bottom right-hand corner, and you'll click Let's Go. As soon as you get to that new page, there are a variety of resources for both grammar and writing instruction that are organized by grade level. We make a selection of our instructional materials free for use in class or for families at home. As students can access as well. So we highly encourage you to take advantage of this amazing resource. And my talk today was specifically about grammar and writing. However, we have a variety of resources here on the platform. So you can access resources for math, for phonics, for English language arts, and we love to get new users and new traffic on the site. We know that you're going to love these free student and family resources and really find them impactful for instruction. So again, thank you so much for having me today. I hope that we've shared some good information with you about impactful grammar instruction and the Writers Workshop model. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I do have some questions. Can I ask them?
Yes, of course, please do.
Yeah. I was wondering, I was curious. I mean, when you introduce each of the action verbs, are they presented like in different tenses or or only present and past tense, or are like they varied the tenses in the presentation?
That is a great question. So these are going to be organized as part of a chapter that's going to introduce the different types of verbs. So present tense, past tense, and they also dig deeper. So the lessons will progress one against another. So there might be 2 or 3 lessons on present tense verbs. There might be 2 or 3 on past tense verbs. And then depending on the grade level, that will depend on the difficulty of the instruction as well. So we start with the simple and move to the complex, depending on the grade level.
Okay, thank you. And for example, the Writers Workshop is within the same lesson. It's like at the end of each of the lessons?
Oh, excellent question. So the way that the program is organized is that first we go through all of the grammar, and then the back of the book is dedicated to Writers Workshop. And it goes first through the writing process. So talking about drafting, revising, editing, publishing, all the steps for the Writers Workshop, and then drills into each genre. So front is grammar instruction and mini lessons, back is Writers Workshop and specific genres.
Okay, and do they have like digital formats, or is only like hard copies?
Oh, we have digital formats. So for teachers who like to quiz their students about their grammar knowledge, we have online practice quizzes, we have games and study aids, and they go all the way up to grade 12.
I was wondering, the platform that you were mentioning about Salier's, your platform, do like teachers can get in there and find like material?
Absolutely. So you're going to receive just a selection of materials that we offer. It won't be everything, but it is free and there's no password needed. So just click the link. Okay. And you'll be able to click on the product. So if you liked the grammar workshop and you wanted to see more about persuasive essay writing, click on grammar workshop, click on persuasive essay writing, and you'll have some free information there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Recuerden que tenemos un concurso especial para ustedes. Es muy sencillo participar. Solo deben acompañarnos durante la feria virtual vía Zoom, seguir Oserco en su cuenta de Instagram, @OsercoBooks. Solo es eso y ya están participando. También recuerden que pueden ver el catálogo de Oserco en su página web www.osercobooks.com. Estamos en la etapa final de este segundo día de la segunda feria virtual de Oserco. En este momento les voy a pedir que respondan la encuesta que les vamos a colocar en el chat. Acaban de poner la encuesta, por favor, hagan clic, respóndanla. Estamos súper interesados en todos los comentarios que puedan hacer sobre la feria. Y así, después de responder esta encuesta, damos por terminada la ponencia correspondiente del día de hoy. Los invitamos a visitarnos en nuestra nueva dirección en el Centro Plaza, Torre C, piso 14, oficina A y B, Los Palos Grandes, en la ciudad de Caracas, o por nuestras redes. Recuerden, Instagram, @OsercoBooks. Muchas gracias, nos vemos mañana.